we're Orange Nation. People say we monkey around. We're too busy talking sports but I put everybody down. I'm the opposite of the monkeys. I put everybody down, Steve.
Yes, you do.
Not a good person. You know who is a good person? Mike McAllister.
Great transition as we welcome in now. Mike kicks off hour number 2 for us as we preview Syracuse, Western Michigan. Mike, great to have you on. So, step up in competition. We keep saying that, right? It's a step up in competition from Colgate to Western Michigan and then from Western Michigan to Purdue. How much of a step up in competition is this in your mind going from Colgate to Western Michigan?
It's pretty significant because you're going from an FCS team that isn't one of the better FCS teams to even, a lower end or mid-tier MAC level team. I still think it's a pretty significant jump. This is a team that beat a good FCS team, doubled up their score last week. So, would they have done something similar to Colgate if Colgate was their opponent and dropped 40, 50 points on them? I think probably that would be the case. But, yeah, it's definitely a jump up in competition. But I still think on paper Syracuse is the better team. And, of course, they're playing at home, so they'll have an advantage there as well.
Yeah, and considered about a 3-touchdown favorite from what I saw. You go back to last week and what Western Michigan did against St. Francis. They ran the ball, and they ran the ball some more, over 300 yards on the ground. They want to go fast. We heard Lance Taylor say that earlier in the week. But with that being said, Lance Taylor also said there will be situations where we huddle up and maybe we slow down if the situation dictates that. Paulie and I were talking earlier in the show, Mike. Is this one of those cases tomorrow that the situation will dictate, they may go a little bit slower, try to shorten the game, grind the clock a little bit to give themselves a chance? Do you expect Western Michigan to go up-tempo tomorrow, or will it be a little bit more subdued?
I think they're going to start out going up tempo and then seeing how Syracuse responds to it. If they're going up tempo on their first possession, for example, and they're having success, they're running the ball over the place, throwing the ball here and there, moving the ball up and down the field, and they're basically dictating to Syracuse what they want to do offensively, why would you go away from that, right? But at the same time, if you start trying to go tempo and you go quick 3 and out, then Syracuse gets the ball, goes down and scores. You try to go tempo again, quick 3 and out. Now you're putting your defense in a real bind, so you have to modify your strategy a little bit there. So I think a lot of it will be dictated based on how they look early in that game. So I think it's imperative for Syracuse to come out and defensively make a couple of stops to start making Western Michigan kind of readjusting themselves on the fly. And I think the best way to do that is to stop the run. Even though Western Michigan wants to go tempo, they are sort of built like an old school MAC team in that they want to stop the run and they want to pound the ball offensively and wear you down. You can still do tempo while you're a predominantly run-oriented offense. So I think that's how Western Michigan's going to approach it, and Syracuse is going to have to be up to the challenge, and a much larger challenge than what they had last week.
All right, last week we posed the question, what are you hoping to see out of this game? And all of us, said at the top of the list was get out of the game healthy. This is a real game, right? I mean, this is an FBS opponent. Is that still number one on your list? Nobody wants to see injuries, right? Are you expecting and hoping to get something out of this game, whereas Colgate was just kind of felt like a glorified scrimmage, a preseason game, if you will? Are you expecting to get anything out of this game?
I think you can learn a little bit more about some of the things we think we saw last week, right, with how good the defense was. They rotated a lot of defensive linemen in and out, got some decent pressure on the quarterback. We want to see that continue, even though there's a step up in competition. Obviously, to your point about the health, I think that's going to be one of the top potential takeaways or things you want to take away from every game this season because of the injury issues Syracuse has had over the last handful of years plus. And so all of that said, the other thing is I want to see if the offensive line makes some strides, because even though they only gave up, I think, a sack last week, or maybe didn't give up any, and there was the one interception and those types of things. There were still instances where Garrett Schrader was pressured pretty quickly, and as we mentioned, the competition wasn't the greatest. So where that's some first game, communication adjustment type of situation, or is there a real concern there? So if Syracuse can make a step forward in terms of their pass protection ability to open up running lanes as they did last week against a better opponent, I think you'd feel much better about themselves moving forward.
I wanted to ask you about LaQuint Allen. We saw him break off, one big run, and his playing time was obviously limited given the score of that game. And it's not fair. He's following an NFL running back, right, in Sean Tucker. So it's really not fair sometimes to compare players. But with that in mind, what do you think the ceiling is for LaQuint Allen? Do you think he's got the ability and the skill set to be another version of Sean Tucker and to follow in that in SU's long line of really good running backs?
Yeah, it's probably going to be something that takes place over a couple of years. I'm not sure that I would expect him to be, a 12 to 1,400 yard back with, double-digit touchdowns in year one. Perhaps he could prove me wrong on that. I just think that's not fair to levy those expectations on him. But I think he's got the potential, especially with what he can do as a pass catcher, that you start looking at all-purpose yards as opposed to just rushing yards, that he could be someone that moves into, potentially top 10, top 15 all-time, yardage leaders from the running back position. It's really going to depend on, a number of things with how he looks the rest of the season, how he deals with being the feature guy the entire season, right? We haven't seen 4, 5, 6 games in, does he wear down a little bit? We haven't seen how he will handle that at the collegiate level. So that's something we have to monitor as well. But I think the talent and the skill set is there. I think the system is there to take advantage of what he does well and, get him into that category of Syracuse running backs you think of when you start looking at that lineage.
I mentioned that you'll be on our Orange Nation TV show throughout the year, and you were earlier this week, and we heard Julian Wiggum on that show say Syracuse-Clemson is now a toss-up game in his mind. Based on what you saw in week one, does your prediction for a win total this year change at all? Whether does the Clemson game get flipped? Does it make it a little bit more winnable? Was there a different opponent that you looked at and said, that's definitely a win now for Syracuse, whether it be, maybe Boston College, for instance? Does your projection or anything change in your mind coming off that first week?
I don't think so. I predicted 7-5, but I strongly considered 8-4. I might lean a little bit more towards 8-4. So if I had to do it again, I might put that down just to be a little bit more on the optimistic side. But you try not to overreact too much to week one. But I'll tell you this: if the Clemson team that showed up against Duke shows up in the Dome in a few weeks, Syracuse is going to beat them. That was not a football team that anybody would be scared of. There were a lot of issues on both sides of the ball, and I think that's a team that Syracuse is going to be amped up to play Clemson no matter what their record and what their ranking is going to be anyway. The Dome is going to be packed. That would be a prime situation for Syracuse to win that game. So if Clemson doesn't show marked improvement over the next few weeks, I think that's a game Syracuse is going to feel very confident going into.
What is the biggest key for tomorrow's game? Is it SU's offensive line, or is it on the other side of the ball stopping the run?
I think it's both. It's hard to really put one over the other. I guess if you're going to force me to, I'd probably say the offensive line, because I think they've got enough other defensive playmakers that they might be able to make up for the defensive line perhaps struggling a little bit. Regardless, the offensive line has to be able to protect Garrett Schrader, and they have to open up running lanes for the Syracuse backs. Even though, Western Michigan played an FBS opponent last week, they held St. Francis to only 51 yards rushing. They were at 2.2 or 2.3 yards a carry. That's obviously very low. Again, understand the competition, but that's a team that's what they're going to try to do to play MAC-style football. They're going to try to stop the run, and they know that if they can limit LaQuint Allen and try to make Syracuse one-dimensional, that plays significantly into their favor. So I think Syracuse's ability to move guys on the offensive line is going to be a huge factor in this game, and I think will give us a little bit of a window into how the rest of the season can play out as well.
All right, can I get a score prediction out of you for tomorrow?
Sure. I will go with Syracuse 34, Western Michigan 20.
Okay, getting it done by a couple of touchdowns. I think most SU fans would be happy with that.
I would consider that, even though you don't cover the spread. I think the spread's a little large, in my opinion. But I would consider that, assuming that's a game where you're in control for most of it, you win by a couple of touchdowns, I think you feel like you check that box going into week 3.
Yeah, I thought that was a big number as well.
That's a lot of spread. As I like
you
to say.
love to say
I said
that.
yesterday about 21. But
Yeah, I think it's
24.
23. 23, 24. Yeah, I thought that was a lot. I saw 23.5 earlier in the week. But anyway, Mike, good stuff as always. We appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, and I will talk to you on the TV side of things on Tuesday.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, Mike McAllister joining us. And again, you can hear him tomorrow, right, Paulie?
Yes, from the home team pub from 12:30 to 1:30.
Doing math in your head?
QSportsTalk.com. Don't know if that's correct, but it sounds right.
All right, let's hit a timeout. We are like right on time today. I love it.
Killing it.
What's that?
We're killing it.
Yeah.
Jordan's joining us next.
He is. We're going to talk more about the game tomorrow. He's got some SU football props for us. You can play along at home as well. And then John Ryan coming up at 1:30. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.